Hello my dear students of 4th primary, how are you? In the previous years, في السنين اللي فاتت, we studied how to collect and organize numerical data. وكمان we also represented it in graphs so that we can easily read them. Like those shapes. Do you remember its name? فاكرين كان اسمهم ايه؟ I am sure all of you remember. عشان أنا لما سألت الستودنتس بتوعي in my class, they said that this is a line plot. The one we studied اللي درسناه في primary 3. وكمان when I asked them about this shape, they said it was a bar graph. بس هما كانوا مستغربين قوي إن البار جراف ده فيه 2 bars next to each other زي ما احنا شايفين كده. And it was not like ما كانش زي الشكل اللي هما درسوه قبل كده. They started asking me questions. بدأوا يسألوني questions كتيرة قوي. قالوا لي Miss, what is the name of that graph? وإزاي بنقدر نرسمه؟ And what type of data إيه الداتا اللي بنستخدمها to be represented using that graph. هنعرف كل الانسرز بتاعت الكويستشنز دي كلها in Unit 11 Data with Fractions. تعالوا الأول let's watch the opener video to explore more of what we are going to learn in this unit. عايزاكم دلوقتي تجيبوا ورقة وقلم وتسجلوا why graphs are very useful and how can graphs إزاي بتساعدنا and the situations you can use graphs to represent them. And now let's watch the video and be back.
Plant life. Graphs and charts are great to display information so that it can be easily read and interpreted. I love gardening and growing plants. I measured the height of a plant over several weeks. I made a note of the date and its height. You can display the information in a line graph. But how do you get from data to a line graph? Take the measurements from each week and plot them in order. Using the centimeter scale, put the points at the correct height on the graph. Don't forget to give your line graph labels and a title. Can you see growth spurts and times when the plant growth plateaued? If the graph had been plotted over a longer period of time, what would you expect to see? Charts and graphs can help us visualize the figures easier. This information will help a gardener or farmer plan more effectively. Line graphs can be used for all sorts of continuous data, recording the temperature of a room over a few hours, the weight of chicks and other living animals over time, increasing country populations over years. What information or data will you collect?
In the video احنا شفنا how graphs بتساعدنا كويس قوي عشان نقرا وكمان نعمل analyze و understand the data. There are many situations in which we can use graphs. زي مثلا ممكن نقدر نستخدمهم to record the weights of chickens and animals over time في خلال فترة زمنية معينة. وكمان ممكن نستخدمهم to display populations. يعني ايه display populations؟ يعني نمثل زيادة عدد السكان over years. Of course there are many other situations بتخلينا ان احنا نستخدم الجرافs in different types. We will explore this in lesson 1. Show me the data. In this lesson هنعرف different أو differentiate between different types of graphs. وكمان I will explain the difference الفرق ما بين البار graphs والدبل بار graphs. وهشرح النهارده when it is appropriate يعني امتى بنستخدم الدبل بار graphs. Let's check some graphs ونحدد the different one in the activity what doesn't belong under access part page 115. Let's see it all together. Okay, in this activity as we see دلوقتي احنا عندنا 3 graphs زي ما احنا شايفين كده these are 3 graphs. محتاجين ان احنا نحدد which graph doesn't belong to the other graphs and why. And now I'll give you enough time to write your ideas. after you have finished أنا متأكدة إن أنتوا كلكم كتبتوا lots of answers. ممكن حد فيكم يقول إن اللاين plot doesn't belong. This is the line plot. ممكن حد يقول إن اللاين plot doesn't belong. Why? Because it doesn't have bars. ما عندهوش bars زي اللي موجودة في ال other two. طيب ممكن حد تاني يقول لي إن الجراف with double bar اللي هو ده is different. Why? Because it is about farm animals. بيتكلم عن الفارم animals. Okay? This one. Okay? طيب والاثنين التانيين الجرافز الاثنين التانيين بيتكلموا عن الانيمالز اللي في الهوم. All the answers على فكرة are right. كمان ممكن تلاقوا find other differences from the information you studied before. These graphs have something in common. كل الثلاثة graphs دول فيهم حاجة مشتركة. They all consist of elements. In the activity, double the data under build, page 116, we will review هنراجع مع بعض the elements of the bar graph. And we will use the graph shown to help us. Please record all the information we will discuss about these elements in your school book. طيب the first element is the title. It explains what the graph is about. Okay? طيب يبقى أول حاجة بتكلم عليها التايتل. التايتل ده اللي هو العنوان بتاعي. Explains what the graph is talking about. The title of the graph we have is a favorite flavors of the ice cream. هو ده التايتل بتاعي، العنوان أو التوبيك اللي أنا بتكلم عليه. طيب السكند element عندي is the scale. إيه السكيل ده؟ السكيل دي numbers that represent the quantity of the data. السكيل بتاع الجراف بتاعي counting by 5. السكيل بتاعي اللي هو النمبرز اللي مكتوبة هنا 0 5 10 15 20 25 30 هو ده السكيل بتاعي counting by 5. This is the second element. طيب الثيرد element اللي هي الانترفلز. يعني ايه الانترفلز؟ الانترفلز اللي هي السبيس between each number on the scale. الانترفلز اللي هي السبيس between each numbers دي أو الانترفل and this is interval. الانترفل اللي هي السبيس between each number and the other number. In the graph the intervals are the spaces between 0 و 5 و 5 و 10 و 10 و 15 و 15 و 20. السبيسز دي المسافات دي هي اللي اسمها intervals. طيب if a bar falls between the intervals لو لقيت بار مثلا between two intervals like this one ما بين 15 و 20 بعمل ايه؟ I will estimate what number أو what quantity it represents. يعني مثلا لو البار جراف ده between 15 and 20 it may be estimate the number ممكن يطلع 17 أو 18 and so on. طيب what about the fourth element؟ الفورث element اللي هي الأكسس. ايه الأكسس ده؟ They are labeled vertical and horizontal lines on the graph. يعني axis بتوعي اللي هو الvertical والhorizontal lines اللي احنا شايفينهم دول هما التو axis بتوعي. In the graph we have vertical axis الليبل بتاعه number of people زي ما احنا شايفين الليبل بتاع الاكسس ده number of people والhorizontal axis labeled ice cream flavors. هو ده الهوريزونتال اكسس بتاعي الليبل بتاعه ice cream flavors. Okay, then we have الليبلز. يعني ايه الليبلز؟ اللي هي الحاجة اللي بتوصف لي أو describe what the horizontal and vertical lines of a graph represent. زي ما قلنا كده these are the two labels I have number of people and ice cream flavors. Okay, now here after we know what are the labels تعالوا بقى نشوف then we have the bar. ايه البار ده؟ it is a way the bar it is a way to represent the data. البار ده هو ده اللي بعمل representing the data. البار هو الريكتانجل اللي احنا شايفينه ده. This is bar, this is another bar and this is another bar and so on. طيب البار ده ممكن ارسمه على فكرة horizontally or vertically. ممكن ارسمه بالطول او بالعرض. Here we have 5 bars in this graph. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 bars. كل bar represent a different flavor of ice cream. يعني مثلا first bar represent the chocolate flavor, second bar represent vanilla, third one represent the lemon, fourth one mint, and fifth one strawberry. Okay? We also have الداتا. ايه الداتا بتاعتي دي؟ الداتا يعني الانفورميشن او المعلومات اللي موجوده في الجراف بتاعي. It includes quantities او other information to be analyzed. طيب الداتا بتاعتي in this graph are different flavors of ice cream. الداتا بتاعتي بتتكلم عن different flavors of ice cream. آخر element خالص اللي هو الكي بتاعي. الelement ده مهم جدا. الكي بتاعي ده بيشرح لي what the data representation mean. طيب هنا في الجراف ده ما عندناش كي in this graph. لكن في axis part اللاين بلوت كان عنده كي. الكي ده بيوريني ان each x represented one student. Now after we have explored the elements of a graph, دلوقتي we need to think about two questions that could be answered by reading the graph. في two questions هنعمل الانسر او هنلاقي الانسر بتاعتهم لما نقرا الجراف and then record them. So what are the questions that may come to our mind؟ ايه الكويستشن اللي ممكن تيجي في دماغنا؟ ممكن حد يقول we could ask what is the most popular ice cream flavor؟ تعالوا كده نكتب what is the most ice cream flavor. Okay, from the graph you can notice that الفانيلا بار representing the biggest number. تعالوا كده لو شفنا الفانيلا بار هنلاقي أكبر بار أو أكبر نمبر عند الفانيلا بار. كمان we can ask how are more، مين أكتر البيوبل اللي بتحب تاكل شوكليت آيس كريم ولا البيوبل اللي بيحبوا ياكلوا المينت؟ طيب here is the chocolate و here is the mint. Right? Who are more؟ طيب وممكن كمان نسأل many questions بس لازم يكون الانسر نجاوبه من خلال الجراف بتاعنا. For example ما ينفعش مثلا أسأل how many people like mango better than ice cream. الإجابة دي مش هلاقيها في الجراف بتاعي عشان الداتا دي are not represented here. طيب do you think we can divide this data further into boys and girls؟ أقدر أقسمها لboys and girls؟ أو can we find out how many girls like vanilla ice cream versus مقابل البويز؟ How could we show both girls and boys؟ لو أنا عايزة represent البويز والجيرلز مع بعض data on the same graph هعمل إيه؟ كل الكويستشنز دي will take us back to the new graph we showed at the beginning of the lesson which is called the double bar graph. فاكرينه؟ الجراف ده هيساعدنا to find the answer to the questions we have just asked. And now I'll give you enough time to think عشان تفكروا about the differences with similarities between the graph you have in your school books will graph shown here as you see. And we will discuss your answers when you are back. طيب دلوقتي أنا متأكدة إن أنتوا كلكم لاحظتوا الsimilarities between the two graphs. For example مثلا الاتنين أو both graphs have the same title. الاتنين عندهم نفس التايتل flavors and scale. وكمان إيه ال different between them؟ إيه ال differences between them؟ ال difference in ال first graph has bars لكن ال second graph has a double bar زي ما احنا شايفين كده double bars. Okay, so one for boys and one for girls. طيب وكمان عندي key here. The key in the second graph is showing that the shaded parts are for boys. يعني shaded دي represent the boys. While non-shaded parts دي represent the girls. Okay, shaded for boys and the non-shaded for the girls. طيب the double bar graph is a new way to represent and analyze data. We use it to represent وanalyze وكمان compare between two sets of data. دايما بستخدم الدبل بار graph to compare between two sets of data, not only one set. For example, from the graph we have here, we can compare favorite ice cream flavors, and we can also compare the data about boys and girls at the same time. في الدبل بار graph there is also a key. الكي ده بيساعدنا ان احنا نعرف the number of boys وكمان ال girls that each bar in a set represents. Maybe now you are thinking, متأكدة ان انتوا كلكم بتفكروا about what can be represented، ايه الحاجات اللي ممكن اعمل لها represent على السنجل بار جراف، وايه الحاجات اللي ممكن اعمل لها represent على الدبل بار جراف. هنعرف كل الانسرز بتاعت الكويستشن ده in the activity single or double on page 117. تعالوا كده نشوفها مع بعض. Here in page 117 in this activity عندنا 3 tables. كل واحد represents sets of data divided into categories. For each table we need to decide if the data could be represented. أنا عايزة أقرر الداتا دي ينفع أعملها على single ولا double bar graph. تعالوا كده نشوف in table number 1. Table number 1 here. حد ملاحظ إن الداتا are divided into 2 sets related to each other. Okay, the data compare المينيمم والماكسيمم، بتعمل compare ما بين المينيمم والماكسيمم temperatures in Cairo for 4 months في جانوري وفبراير ومارش وابريل. اوكي، يبقى هنا لازم استخدم ايه؟ single bar graph ولا double bar graph؟ Yes, I can use here the double bar graph. Okay, so could this data be represented in a double bar graph? I will say yes, it can be represented in a double bar graph. اوكي، طيب تعالوا نشوف بقى in table 2. دلوقتي كلنا ملاحظين ان table 2 has only data on students that like a certain type of sport. بيتكلم على students, number of students that like certain type of sport. طيب تفتكروا ان احنا هنستخدم single bar graph ولا double bar graph؟ Yes, here I will use a single bar graph. يبقى could this data be represented in a double bar graph? I will say no because it is represented in a single bar graph. عشان بيتكلم على حاجة واحدة بس. تعالوا كده نشوف table 3. Here as you see table 3. Here I have data on the favorite foods for both boys and girls. أنا متأكدة إن أنتوا كلكم دلوقتي بتقولوا that we can use the double bar graph وكلكم على فكرة صح. So I will write here, could this data be represented in a double bar graph? I will say yes because I will represent it in a double bar graph. Now that after we decide what can be represented on a single bar graph and what can be represented on a double bar graph, تعالوا نشوف بقى how we can analyze and compare data by answering some questions about table 4. تعالوا كده نشوف table 4 with each other. طيب, here in problem number 4 we have a graph talking about the number of students who like fruit and vegetables. And now I'll give you enough time to answer questions 4 and 5 on page 118. After you have checked the graph, surely most of you could answer the questions. Question number 4 is asking about which grade has the same number of students which like or who like the fruit and vegetables. طيب من الجراف هنلاقي ايه؟ From this graph we can see that the answer is primary 2. Look in primary 2 as you see here. Primary 2 we find that it is the grade that has 2 equal bars. لو بصينا كده على البارز هنلاقيهم 2 equal bars. So the answer is primary 2. تعالوا كده نكتبها مع بعض. Here is primary 2. Okay. Let's move to question number 5. Here we need to know which grade likes vegetables more than fruit. أنه grade بيحب ال vegetables more than fruits. طيب أهم حاجة of course you can notice كلكم ملاحظين إن ال fruit bars are colored in orange وال vegetable bars are colored in green. عرفنا إزاي من الكي بتاعي. This is the vegetable and this is the fruit. So we need to find which grade has the green أو longer green bar than the orange. طيب which grade here? Yes, look here, primary 3. Primary 3, the green bar greater or longer than the orange bar, right? So this is the right answer. I will write here primary 3. طيب let's move to the next one. Question number 6 in page 119. دلوقتي أنا محتاجة أعرف how many more students in primary 4 like fruit versus students in primary 1. يعني قد إيه students more than primary 1 like fruits. طيب as we have just said مش إحنا قلنا الفروت bars in orange والvegetables in green. So let's see how many students in primary 4 like fruit. تعالوا كده نشوف primary 4. How many students like fruit? Look here. Yes, there are 100 students, right? Okay, you need to look at the line drawn from the end of the bar. أهو الend بتاع البار وهنزل تحت هلاقيهم 100 students. In the same way, we can find the number of students in primary 1 who like fruit. يبقى هروح عند primary 1 وهروح عند آخر البار بتاع الأورنج وهنزل down. So they are 20 students, right? يبقى here 100 students and here 20 students. طيب عايز أعرف قد إيه more students in primary 4 than primary 1. هعمل إيه؟ دلوقتي محتاجة أعمل subtraction. هعمل 100 minus 20. تعالوا كده نعملها مع بعض. يبقى 100 minus 20. So the answer is 80 more students like fruits in primary 4 than in primary 1. Now you can answer questions 7 and 8 on your own way. Let's solve now question number 9. Question number 9 here, he's asking me, بيسألني about the total number of students who were surveyed. يعني إيه surveyed؟ يعني اشتركوا في الاستبيان ده أو في جمع المعلومات دي. طيب, do you think we need to find the number of students from the fruit bars أو vegetables bars؟ ممكن حد فيكم يحس ان هو متلخبط شويه، بس على فكره هي سهله جدا. In each grade لو بصينا في كل grade we have students who like fruits و vegetables. مش كل grade هنا في students like fruits و vegetables. هي دي students اللي اشتركوا في جمع المعلومات. So the number of students in each grade هو ده number who like fruit plus the number of the students who like vegetables. تعالوا كده نشوف for example primary 1. Number of students who like fruit is what? تعالوا كده نروح للفروت ننزل down 20 students, right? When number of students who like vegetables is, look here at the end of the bar is what? Yes, it is about 15. ليه بقول about 15؟ عشان it is between 10 and 20. So it is about 15. Okay. Now ده معناه ايه؟ ده معناه ان number of students اللي هم اشتركوا في الاستبيان ده او جمع المعلومات في grade 1 is 20 plus 15. تعالوا كده نكتب 20 plus 15. يبقى 20 plus 15 equals to what? Equals to 35 students. Now the number of students in grade 2 is what? تعالوا كده نشوف grade 2 is 60 and 60. Right? عشان الاتنين two bars are equal. So 60 and 60 equals what? Equals to 120. يبقى هنكتب في grade 2 120 اللي هما 60 and 60. Right? In the same way you can calculate the number of students in each grade. هنحسب the number of students في كل grade في primary 3 و primary 4 وكمان primary 5. And then you will add all the numbers in all the grades to find the total number. تعالوا بقى نشوف question number 10 بيقول لي إيه. Here is question number 10 is asking why this a good data set to use a double bar graph. We can say because it represents the and compare between a sets of data, fruits and vegetables. بيعمل compare between حاجتين fruits and vegetables for multiple grades. Now we have reached the connect part on page 119. Let's see it all together. تعالوا نشوف بقى connect part here. Here in the connect part, as you see here, in this activity محتاجين إن احنا ندي example أو نقول example for a data set using a double bar graph instead of a single bar graph and explain why. I am sure you have lots of ideas. عندكم أفكار كتيرة قوي for situations where we can use the double bar graph. You can write your ideas in your school books and share them with your friends and your teacher in your classroom. Here, connect, we have to have more practice at reading graphs. You can scan the code shown here and at the end or at the beginning of the lesson to go to the practice part and check your understanding parts in the digital copy of your math textbook on the Egyptian Knowledge Bank. And now, this is the end of today's lesson in which we have learned to distinguish أو نفرق between the different types of graphs. وكمان we explain the difference between bar graphs and double bar graphs and explain when it is appropriate يعني إمتى ممكن نستخدم double bar graph. I hope you have enjoyed today's lesson with me. Thank you so much for your watching and see you next time. Goodbye.